Davis, and I'm back from Mental Health Chats. And today we've got Vicky Midwood. Hello, Vicky. How are you going?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for joining us. So Vicky is going to be talking about managing compulsive eating disorder. So Vicky, can you just tell everybody what you do?
Absolutely. So I tend to refer to myself as the addiction and disordered eating eliminator, because what I try and do is actually eliminate the need and the desire to eat compulsively or obsessively. So that's pretty much what I do.
Oh, wow. Out of interest, why do you do what you do?
Because that was my story for way
Wow.
longer than it needed to be. If I'd have known what I understand now about how the body works as a whole, instead of trying to just work on my mind. So I try and make the journey to get over this stuff much easier and much faster than it used to be before we understood fully the mind-body connection.
Wow. So why does compulsive eating disorder happen?
There's a number of reasons, and just like we're all individual, everybody's reason for starting that path of behavior is going to be slightly different, but there are some commonalities that kind of run through everybody. And people who succumb tend to be perfectionists,
Mm-hmm.
be people pleasers, have to grow up before their time, so maybe they've had to be the parent, or they've had one or two parents who were emotionally unavailable, and they do it as a way of coping with life, with emotions, and with stress.
Wow, that's really, really interesting. So what would be lovely for anybody watching or listening to this would be if you could give us some tips and hints on how do people manage compulsive eating disorders, because you work with people on this. So how have people resolved this?
Well, I think the very first step is to know that it's nothing to do with willpower, right? You're not weak-willed. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. I think that's the most important thing to know. The second thing is to actually acknowledge that you've got an issue, because most people who have an issue with food tend to kid themselves that their behavior is normal. And so actually admitting, which is very difficult because we're usually embarrassed about it, is to first admit to yourself that there's an issue. And then we need to look at what do we think is the thing that's pushing us to want to use food. Often it's to soothe, it's to push out emotions, or it's to numb ourselves. So one of the best things that you can do is just go, halt. When you're about to open the fridge or the cupboard door, just literally put your hand up and go halt and ask the question, am I hungry? Am I angry or anxious? Am I lonely? Am I tired? And then there's a final one to ask, am I just wanting a treat? Because you might be. So
Mm.
you stop and you kind of ask yourself those questions first. That's the first thing to do. And then the second thing to do is, if you've answered the question and you don't really know, and you want to go ahead and eat the food anyway, try and change the behavior of eating the food. So rather than standing by the fridge and shoving it all in, getting it over and done with as quickly as possible and not even tasting it, actually take it to a table, put it on a plate, and give yourself permission to actually chew slowly and taste the food. And it's going to change energetically how you feel. It's going to change emotionally how you feel. Those two are the top tips that I get my clients to practice first.
And it's practice, it's changing those habits, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yes.
Definitely. And it's hard to change habits. I think the statistic is it takes 3 times longer to change a habit than it is to learn something new. So this is a habit that's been ingrained. And I love the fact that you say, put it on a plate and enjoy every mouthful, because we don't do it really as human beings anymore. We're in a hurry all the time. So we're hurrying with eating, we're hurrying doing this, we're hurrying doing that. And we should be sitting at tables and eating. We should be taking our time. We should be chewing every mouthful.
This is the problem that we've got in today's world. Our relationship with our meals and with food and actually with our bodies has changed so much. And we are living in a fast-paced environment. And that means that we're not giving our body the opportunity to function well. And this is why I love what I do, because I help people to understand how their body works. One of the key things when it comes to compulsive eating is people often have unbalanced blood sugar levels and a microbiome that's out of balance as well. And those two things combined will actually push you to wanting to eat more of the foods that you feel you shouldn't be eating or don't want to eat. And that's why I said it's not about willpower. So if we can just stop and slow down and think about allowing the body to digest our food, and that means that before we even eat, we need to be in a state of calm and relaxation so that there's a message going to the gut to produce the enzymes and to produce the acid required to actually break the food down. Now, when we're rushing around and eating on the go and sitting at the desk and not even noticing what's going in, we're not allowing the body to digest. And that causes the physiological issues that keep the compulsive eating cycle going. So you've got a double whammy happening. You've got the physiological and then you've got the habit. So yeah, it's an interesting one, but it is actually more manageable than you think once you know what's happening.
And you obviously work with your clients on this. Is that on a one-to-one basis or in groups?
I tend to find with this stuff that one-to-one works better, especially if it's the first time anybody's tried to get freedom from this pattern. If somebody's tried a few times and they like the camaraderie of a group, then that's different. But oftentimes we have to go quite deep as to what is setting them off. And that can be quite embarrassing. It can be something that they don't really want to share with a lot of people until they've increased their own self-confidence and self-worth. And then support from a group, that's when it's really important.
You've turned on a few light bulbs for me. A lot of it is about self-confidence and self-worth as well, isn't it? Yeah. And I think I'm going to rewatch this because you have actually given a lot of tips. And I think it's something that I need to watch a couple of times to take it in, because I've thought of a few people throughout this that I know, and it does make sense, everything that you're saying.
It does, but because we're not taught really about how the mind and the body and the hormones and the digestive system affect our mood and our behavior patterns, we don't make the link. And we live in a society that very much separates the head from the body, the mental from the physical. And until we can reconnect them, we're always going to struggle with something, right? And it could be that people, maybe it's shopping, maybe it's gambling, maybe it's looking at your phone too often, or maybe it's just anxiety. But once we start to realize that our sleep, our environment, the people we hang out with, the language that we use, and actually allowing the body to work well on a cellular level to digest our food and utilize the good stuff that we're putting in, we're always going to struggle with changing things and habits and our thinking, because your body wants to work optimally. But if we've got bits that are out of kilter, it's always going to be struggling. And when we struggle, we're under stress. When we're under stress, we turn to food or alcohol, and it works. And that's why we keep doing it.
Wow. Because you work with people with addictions, and I'm going to be doing a series on addictions, and you work with people with, is it alcohol addictions?
Alcohol, yes, alcohol and food, just because we ingest both. And so they both have an effect on our digestive system, on our hormones, and therefore on our neurotransmitters and our brain. So yes, it's alcohol and food, and that's what I know. That was my story. I had both going on.
Wow.
Sometimes people can flip between the two, or they can put down alcohol and then food might become an issue, or they might get to grips with their food, but they find that they're drinking a little bit too much.
Wow.
So I think, it's everybody's different. And I think it's important that you understand that all of addictions stem from usually low self-worth and trauma. It's massive, right? And that doesn't have to be a huge event, but it can be just feeling that you're never good enough, consistently being criticized, whether it's about your size when it comes to food issues, or about your abilities when it comes to using another substance. But oftentimes low self-worth and trauma are the two biggest things that we need to look at. But until we can work with the physiology and start to change the habits, we're never going to get out of the cycle. So we need to look at what's going on physically and habit change in conjunction with. It's not either or, it's and.
Wow, that is so interesting. And on your website, you've got a program, haven't you, that I'm going to put the link for. So would you like to explain the program?
Yes, so the Eating Freely program is a program that has been proven to work. We've had hundreds of people actually go through this program and get amazing results. It's a time-framed program, so we do it over 20 weeks. We cover 12 kind of different areas that help you to basically understand all of the stuff that I've just spoken about. So we get to the bottom of what is your emotional trigger. How do we actually make those habit changes? So we're using CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. We're using NLP. We're looking at changing your language and resetting your brain. But we're also looking at rehabilitating the gut and the nervous system. So all of those things are combined into this one program. And at the end of the 20 weeks, you can then see where you're at, and then you can move forward onto something else if you need a little bit more help. And so I'm so excited because this is the first program that brings together all of those elements that I was talking about in a way that is doable and not overwhelming.
Wow. So is that an online program, or do people see you on
one-to-one? Yeah.
One-to-one program.
Yeah.
Excellent.
One-to-one
So they
program.
can read about that on your website,
Absolutely.
which
Yeah.
I will put on the little chat area. So thank you very much. That was so insightful, Vicky. I could talk to you all day. It's so lovely. So what I would like to do is introduce our last guest for this series, and her name is Laura Clark. And Laura is a dietitian and nutritionist, and she's going to be talking about the myths around disordered eating and dieting, which is really, really interesting. And all the speakers go hand in hand and will help you with so many ideas. So thank you, Vicky, and do take care.
Thank you so much, you too.